Spurs find themselves in a bit of a dilemma with the number nine position. They have a few different options, but no one's really staked their claim yet to be the starting number nine for Spurs. I'm joined by Fuad, um, massive friend of the channel and a great speaker on all things football, but obviously a massive Spurs fan. How you doing, Fuad?
Very well, man. Very well. This is, I feel like a long overdue link up. I'll be honest with you. We've been obviously going back and forth on the timeline. So, international break, perfect time to come and collab and do something. You know what I mean? So good to be here, man.
Yeah, I think first of many appearances for you on the channel, but welcome for your
Definitely.
debut. Yeah, I want to get straight into it to be honest. I think we'll just talk about the kind of options that I think I see as our number nines, which is pretty obvious, which is Tel. We've got Kolo Muani, who's barely kicked a ball for us so far. Solanke, who's obviously returning from injury soon, and then we've had Richarlison, who's played majority of minutes so far. So I'm going to start with Richarlison. How do you think he's done so far? What do you see as his kind of strengths, and what do you see as his weaknesses?
I feel like he's done so far what I personally expect from Richarlison, which is a few flickers of flames where you think, you know what, we could be onto a potential hot patch. However, those flames kind of quickly fan out and you kind of are second guessing whether you can really use him for the long term, if that makes sense. I feel like he's someone who I've had a lot of frustrations with over the last couple of years. I wasn't a fan of it when we signed him initially. I thought the fee of 50 million plus 10 million add-on, I think it was for Everton at the time, for a striker who I felt like didn't really have a specified position because at that time at Everton he was playing a bit on the left, a bit through the middle when Calvert-Lewin was out injured, but he didn't have any specialized skills in my opinion. I didn't see him as a channel runner. I didn't see him as a hold up man. I didn't see him as an elite finisher. I didn't see him as a link up player. So I sat there thinking, all right, we've got someone who we can potentially build around because he's got that kind of doggedness and the hard work to him. Maybe those elements of his game will come, but after I've seen one season, two seasons, and now we're going into I don't know the third or fourth season, I kind of know what I'm going to get with Richarlison, which is a few hot moments. He's going to run hard. He's going to work hard. And if it's a counter-attacking system, it might work well for him because you probably won't rely on him to maybe finish as many chances because we probably won't get as many. But I think his time at Spurs is just kind of summed up as a backup option and someone who can maybe pop up with a purple patch here and there. But in my honest opinion, I don't think we can rely on him for a full season. I don't think any Spurs fan can sit there and comfortably tell me, yeah, Richarlison will definitely get us 15 league goals this season. No, he could do if he puts it all together, but I feel like we've been waiting for that for too long at this point. And for me, I just see him as a backup option. And if there is an opportunity to maybe sell him in January or even in the summer just gone up, I felt like he's one of those few assets in the squad that actually has viable options outside of Tottenham.
Yes, I think you make a good point about Richarlison's doggedness because I think that probably is his best attribute, and that might be kind of a bit of a disservice to a footballer when you say their best attribute is doggedness. But if you put in like an opposition, I think where Richarlison, oh, let me undo them. I think when Richarlison shines is in like packed penalty areas, and it is that doggedness to kind of be able to constantly be on the move, and not kind of give a moment's peace to any defender. And that
Yeah,
doesn't that's quite a like a basic attribute, but it does make a difference. And when you are kind of chasing a goal, I think his ability to constantly be fighting in the penalty box, kind of grappling with centre backs, scorer of kind of ugly goals, which I think obviously not all strikers can do. I think when we come on to Solanke, I'll talk about I think the lack of his abilities to do that. But when there is these kind of situations and we're chasing a goal, or when you're playing against a low block, I think Richarlison's not a bad option, especially when they leave a lot of spaces out wide and you have to
yeah.
rely on these crosses. He's someone that will run for 90 minutes and won't kind of give the back four a moment's peace. And I think that is where he shines really, and that's not enough for a top six level side. You want someone who can be able to kind of link play more. I think his link play has been really disappointing. I think when he did come from Everton, I kind of expected a little bit more technical ability because when he moved from Watford originally, he came through as a sort of kind of flary winger.
Bro, you almost thought what João Pedro is like
Yeah,
now at Chelsea is what you initially thought he was at Watford, and then when he went to Everton, he kind of became a bit of a streaky striker and he went on kind of good runs. But then when he came to Spurs, the fee was just kind of a bit alarming for me at the time, especially because I think we got our fingers burnt as well with Ndombele like a year or two before. So I was always a little bit apprehensive when we made these kind of big money signings. But that was the thing was I remember me and Tapping Tobes had a show at the time, and I kept saying to him, what is his standout attribute? And I was like, it's really concerning if you're an attacker and your standout attribute is your hard work. I feel
Yeah,
like if you're a defensive midfielder, if you're a centre mid, if you're a fullback, I can take that. But
yeah,
if you're an attacker, that needs to be almost like way down the pecking order. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? So,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it's probably quite clear, even with his injury record, that he won't be here for the long-term future. I do think the kind of because I kind of want to touch on which players kind of operate best with these strikers, and in terms of Richarlison, I think the only one that I can kind of see creating a bit of a partnership if he got a kind of run of games in form is probably Porro with his ability to cross out wide into Richarlison. Obviously he's got good aerial ability, but there's none of these kind of guys who are nice and technical and want to link play. I don't see that as like a pretty optimal dynamic. I think they want someone they can link off more. I think to be honest, Kudus's ability to kind of go 1v1 and get to the byline, we saw
yeah.
against Burnley first game of the season that kind of link worked well. But again, I think a lot of the heavy lifting is done by Kudus there. I don't think Richarlison. Obviously, they were two great finishers, but I don't think
Yeah.
kind of other strikers couldn't do that. Let's go on to Solanke now. So just give me your kind of overview of what you think of Solanke. Obviously, mainly last season because we haven't seen him. We've seen one brief cameo this season.
Yeah.
What did you kind of make of the signing? What do you like about him? What do you not like about him?
To be fair, honestly, I really like his profile, man. And in terms of when we signed him, I was actually one of those. I was really happy. I was like, finally, we've got a striker who the previous season scored 19 goals. I feel like throughout his career, he's been steadily progressing year by year. From when he went to Bournemouth, you could see they went down to the Championship, and he almost did like the Jack Grealish route, I like to call it, going down with the team, cutting your teeth in the Championship, but coming up with them, and then rising up the ranks. And then when he came to us, I was expecting similarly Ndombele record signing. He's going to come in and take that next level, and especially with a manager like Ange, who's going to put him in a very attacking system. But it was what you touched on earlier. I felt like he lacked the killer instinct last season, and I loved the hold up play. I loved the link up play. I think his passing, I didn't even know was that good in my opinion. There's some of the passes when he holds it up and you just see him shovel it between two man, eye the needle stuff. I was like, wow, he's actually technically very, very good. But is that coming at a detriment of him being in the box more? Because I felt like there were moments when we'd get high up the pitch and Solanke isn't in those kind of dangerous position to sniff those second chances and get those ugly goals like you touched on Richarlison scores. And that is an area where I feel like a lot of strikers can pick up 7, 8 goals a season very easily. And last season, I think he got 8 in the league, which for someone who you paid 65 million for, I don't really think you can kind of accept that. Coming into this season, I was expecting a massive, ramp up in those kind of numbers, but he started the season injured now. You've had Kolo Muani coming, who's more competition. You've had Richarlison kickstart a little bit of a fire, and you think, you know what? Is Solanke in trouble a little bit in terms of minutes wise this season? So I'm a little bit concerned, and I really hope he kind of comes back from this injury kind of with the bit between his teeth and really, hungry. But I'm looking at his age and I'm thinking 28. He doesn't really have time to waste as well, so he should be in the peak of his powers. But all in all, I think in terms of a profile, he can be very complementary to a lot of those attacking midfielders behind him, I think, and they can help get the best out of him with the likes of Simmons and Kudus, I think, this season a little bit more. So I'm actually optimistic that when he does come back from injury, he's going to be that main man and take another level up from what he was last season. But last season, there were positives there. However, there were still a few negatives which you can highlight and, say there's areas to improve on.
I think yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think some of the over hate was a bit too far in my opinion. I think the season was poor, so everyone looked quite poor. I thought Solanke pretty much held his own in most games. I thought before Christmas he was one of our better players.
Yeah.
and yeah, and he was pivotal in the Europa League run. I think there's two kind of outcomes I think with Solanke. I especially like, but also don't like this kind of four here. If you take Odobert, Simmons, Kudus, and Solanke, because as we speak now, I don't think you can rely on any of these four to put up a massive goal output. I think, to be honest, Simmons, although he hasn't scored yet, I think his goal record's been pretty strong. Kudus, I think 100% has the ability to get more goals. I think the kind of role we've been putting him in out here has been probably a bit of a detriment to his potential goal scoring ability. But if we can get him more central at times, I think that's a capability of his. But what I really like about this four is that you've got three very technical players that can kind of rotate around,
Yeah.
move around. And I think what Solanke brings to that is a bit of a foundation, a bit of a like an anchor point, I guess, for them to kind of all move around. And I think you do need that. You want I think PSG do such a good job of it, of like giving certain players freedom to rotate and then having someone who really anchors it. You know, Vitinha is a massive anchor. The fullbacks are anchors, although they're out wide, they're the ones who keep the width.
Yeah.
And I think to allow these kind of three players who are all very technical, I think very intelligent movers, just really off the cuff kind of players, you want that kind of stability and focal point as the nine who can hold the ball and allow for runs beyond, who can kind of hold the ball and link play with little give and goes and stuff like that. And I think Solanke is the perfect striker for that kind of thing, but he does also need to, when the opportunity arises and we get in here, he needs to make the box and be able to score the easy striker goals that he doesn't get enough of. So that's kind of my thoughts on him. I think he's a great player for that kind of thing, but he needs to add the goals as well, because our wingers aren't necessarily goal scorers like they once were with obviously Sonia.
No, 100%. And listen, we've lost Son over the summer as well, who always used to contribute a fair chunk of our goals every season as well. So I've said this season, I genuinely think there's almost like not a vacuum, but a bit of a space for guys to really take this team by the scruff of the neck and make it their own. You've had a lot of big characters leaving over the last couple of years. All those guys from that kind of great Poch era, if you like, that everybody fell in love with, the Kanes, the Sons, the Dembeles, the Vertongans, they're all gone. So now it's a case of all these new young guys. It's an opportunity. The guys like Kudus, the Simmons, you can really make this your team, especially with the Madisons and Kulusevskis out, who it was looking like it was going to become their team. This is an opportunity for these guys to put their fingerprint all over it. And as you said, I love that you brought up the PSG kind of interchange as well, because that's one thing, or a meta, that I think that is definitely going to be a lot more used by other teams this season, because the fluidity that you saw with those kind of front three and the midfielders behind them, the way they just interchange, I think we've got the players for it. And I look at Thomas Frank as a manager. He's someone who, he loves a dibble-dabble and a tweak in the system. So I can see that happening when Solanke does come in, that he does give a bit more license to those attack midfielders to really interchange and kind of flow around. So I hope to see that, definitely.
Yeah, and I think just on that, I think so much of kind of out of possession game is man to man nowadays, and that's why the floating and the rotating can be really effective, because it's chaos. If you can displace their structure because they're going man to man, that's kind of the way to do it, to rotate. Okay, so speaking of kind of players to kind of take the team by the scruff of the neck, this is someone who I thought would do that this season, and there's still plenty of time. I did think that this kind of manager would really get the best out of him, because I did kind of see Tel as more this kind of player who comes in off the left, gets shots off really well. You want him constantly facing goal. And we haven't seen him play left much. He's played central most of the time. And I made a video last week about, I think his best performance of the season was probably that Leeds game, and he didn't tear things up, but I think there was positive signs there. And I don't think it's a coincidence that was because Simmons was playing in the 10, and you didn't need Tel to kind of drop into these areas where you really don't want Tel, because his back to goal game is weak, to be honest. Where he can be lethal is when he's facing goal and can get shots off.
I think you
And so I
touched on
think,
that in a under 21 video as well. You did, I think, a couple weeks back, where you kind of talked about when
yeah,
he's for the under 21s in France. Him and Odegaard obviously have this great link up there, but it's always those kind of areas where in and around the edge of the box, just on the left or on the right, where he can really get shots off, because his shooting technique is actually very good.
crazy. Yeah. I think that's his best ability, and his ability to actually create shooting opportunities for himself is really good. I think we haven't seen enough of it. But like I said, so many of his minutes, you've just seen him have to receive the ball really deep with his back to goal, and that's just not him. Um, like this, in the same way, we've also seen him when he has played out left, he's been really wide and deep.
Yeah.
And like again, Odegaard can do that. I think Odegaard is more than comfortable receiving it pretty much anywhere on the pitch. But Tell, that's just not his game, and so no wonder I think he's looked bad. I think part of it has been a confidence issue, but I think part of it's been just the way we've deployed him.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Tell is someone that he's 20, so I really urge people to give him time. I think there's been so many players who have made it at the top level who at 20 weren't putting up any trees. I think there's signs there, and I do think if we profile him this way as a 9, with a 10 behind him, I don't think we should ever kind of play him when Sar's here. That like kind of reserve 10 type position. I don't think that's ever going to help him. But yeah, he's not. I don't think he's necessarily going to be our starting 9. But what do you think about his potential minutes this season, and mainly as a 9?
I really agree with you there, by the way, about kind of like giving him patience. Like, of all the players in my eyes that needs a bit of patience or needs that kind of arm around their shoulder, I think it's Mathys Tel. Because you even look at kind of his career up to date. He left Rennes after making 10 appearances. He didn't really score. He didn't really kind of cement and cut his teeth like a Camavinga or a Dembele who came out of there, who had like a season or half a season. He jumped ship straight away and went to one of the biggest clubs in Europe, where Harry Kane basically instantly walked through the door and relegated him to a... So he's never, ever in his career to date, up to 20, had a manager who's put his arm around him and said, you know what, I'm going to give you 10 games to go and get your goals. I'm going to give you 6 games to go and get your confidence up. So I feel like now he's in this kind of weird situation where he's made the loan move. We saw kind of flashes. We've made it permanent. And to be fair, we actually got the price down to a much more reasonable fee, in my opinion. But these early couple games, I feel like I remember the West Ham one. I was really disappointed because he got that start in that 9 position and was fairly anonymous throughout the game. But then against Fulham, he looked a bit more lively. And I was like, oh, that's the Tell I like. If you're going to play in the 9, I think, as you said, he needs to be further up in those kind of dangerous areas where he can really be useful. But this season, I had him earmarked as a breakout player potentially, because I think his stocks are almost so low. The only way is up, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think on that left wing position, him and Odegaard, I think they can split the minutes, and he should be more than comfortable to play out there. But I hear behind the scenes that he sees himself as more of a 9. I think if he does that, he kind of taxes himself and taxes his minutes. And I always think for any forward, it's always good to kind of well round your game sometimes by playing out wide, by playing through the middle. You get different perspectives, you get different aspects and different parts of your game that develop as well. And I think Tell this season, although we might not see a breakout year per se, I do think Thomas Frank will put his arm around him, and we will see some semblance of a player that we can develop for the next 2 or 3 years, because I don't think he's anywhere near the finished product. And I still think there is a lot of potential, because you don't get, firstly, coming out of the Rennes Academy, you know what that academy is like. They're churning out talents like it's diamonds at this point. Bayern Munich don't kind of spend that money on nonsensical talents. And I would like to think, from what I've seen so far, even for the France under-21s, there is a player there. So for me, I hope Thomas Frank, I've seen what you've done for Ivan Toney. I've seen what you've done for Wissa. I've seen what you've done for Mbeumo. And I've seen what you've done for Watkins. Can you do me one more, please, brother? That's all I even got Sade, let's not forget, who was their bench striker last year, scoring double figures. So Thomas Frank is a little bit of a striker whisperer. And we've got a couple of strikers here that I think, you know, they're struggling for confidence. They're struggling with injuries. They're for one reason or another, they haven't, the fire hasn't really lit. So I really hope he can get into someone like a Tel and really get the best out of him.
I think the point you made about his lack of actual senior minutes under his belt is such a good one, because I think when you watch him, you can kind of tell, no pun intended. Um, so yeah, you're right. He barely broke into that Ren team, and obviously he was already being chased by major clubs at 17 years old. And then Bayern, it was always bit part cameos. And I think there's so much to say about the transition between youth football and first team football,
Mhm.
and the amount of kind of refinement you need to cut it at this level. And I think he's kind of learning on the job almost. Like, you can tell the talent's there, but there are some kind of slightly like rough things that he does in terms of his
Yeah,
link play and stuff like that. But I think what is such a good sign, and I know people will be frustrated by this, but I always say with young strikers, if they're getting opportunities, it's such a good sign, because you
yeah,
see so many kind of young strikers get thrown in. I think, not to call a specific striker out, but when United just chucked in Chido Obi, who's obviously one of the most talked about academy products in the country, he didn't get a sniff. Like, he didn't create anything for himself, and he just looked like a youth player playing in a first team football.
yeah,
And he's a very talented young player. But I think the fact that Tel is getting these opportunities is a very good sign. And
yeah.
yeah, maybe he never puts it together in terms of the refined finishing, but I think in my eyes he will. So I think that's one to definitely be patient on.
Even
The
I
last
think even
one,
as you said, if he
yeah,
doesn't
quickly go.
become that refined finisher, there's still a player that you can get out of that is useful to a team. He has attributes that I feel like, whether as a winger, whether as a second striker, or he has a role in the team that he can add on to. So even if he doesn't become this 20, 30 goal a season, get him to be better than what Lucas Moura was a couple of years ago. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean? The
yeah.
standard for substitute wingers or backup strikers at this club hasn't been very high, bro. We've lived up with guys like Fernando Llorente, Vincent Janssen. We've seen all sorts. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I hope we can just get a
100%.
little bit more out of him.
100%. Let's move on to the last one, who we've barely seen play in the Spurs show. I think we saw 10 minutes maybe,
I mean, I
where
mean,
he didn't
I
really
mean,
touch
I don't know
touch the
if you
ball.
saw, but we did see a picture this week.
Yeah, yeah, behind closed doors friendly. So Kolo Muani is, I think, looking like he is fit. I mean, up to match speed, who knows? But for me, I'm actually really excited about Kolo Muani. And I think the signing's gone a little bit under the radar, partly because he hasn't played a single minute, but
Yeah,
also I think when we signed him, I was seeing kind of people talk down on him a little bit, and I think you just have to look at that Juventus spell, which was 6 months loan, in a new environment, and he hit the ground running straight away. I think he had the best goal to minute ratio in that period in top five
yeah.
leagues of Europe. So he just kind of hit the ground running, and his ability to, I mean, he's got so many good abilities, but his carrying is so strong because he's so quick. His like long strides just kind of gallop over the turf, and then his ability to kind of create chances for himself again, I think is massive. Again, I don't think he's a necessarily massively refined finisher, but his ability to create chances for himself and for others, to be honest, he's very like good at combinations and stuff like that, is very, very good. And you've seen that in his Frankfurt spell, you've seen that in his Juventus spell, and obviously the PSG move failed, but better players have failed at PSG, Real Madrid, Barcelona. These things always happen, and I don't think you should ever kind of write off a player for that. What are your thoughts on him if you have seen him? And kind of what could he potentially bring that other strikers in the squad maybe can't?
I almost look at him as like the anti Solanke, because he, rather than dropping deep and wanting to link up, I see him as like a willing channel runner, someone who's willing to be a threat in behind, push that defensive line further back, and bring the team up with his physicality and his kind of speed. And that's what I saw at Juve. That's what we saw whenever he's played for France, and at Frankfurt as well. Before the Ekatike mania came off, he was the guy that kind of set the template for that. And I think he could be definitely a major boost for us this season. It's just a case of how quick does he kind of hit the ground running now. I'm not saying, as soon as he starts, we're going to start expecting 20 goals or whatever. But I think in terms of physically what he brings, we haven't seen a striker like that since Harry Kane, to be honest. Someone who can kind of get beyond that and use his body really well like that. Because I think Solanke, as I said, he likes to drop deep. He likes to link up play. He's got the great technical ability. And Kolo Muani, as you said, he's not a refined finisher, but I think he's almost one of those chaos in the right area type
Yeah,
of strikers. And I think get him in and around those boxes, get Kudus down the byline, get Xavi Simons playing him those passes in behind. He is just going to cause chaos. He might need 3 chances to get you that one goal, but I'll take it because he's just going to give me something a little bit different. And I think that is the one thing I actually do kind of like with all of our strikers is they're all kind of different profiles a little bit. You've got Tel, who's a little bit more of a winger and can kind of create his own shot. You've got Kolo Muani, who's a physical monster, in my opinion, can also create his own shot, but is more of a channel runner, in my opinion, and pushes defensive. Richarlison, busybody. When you're playing low block counter, he's actually perfect for that. And then Solanke, who's someone who's technical with upside if he adds the goals to his game. So I think Kolo Muani could be in for a good season, but it's just a case of how quick does he kind of hit the ground running.
I think that's a great place to end the video in terms of talking about all four of them. If we could create one striker that combined all four of the
just molds into one.
Yeah, we're looking at R9.
Harry Kane, please come back.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I do think with Kolo Muani that there's potential upside there. Obviously, at the moment, it's a dry loan. I don't know why that's not unselecting.
That's the only annoyance I would say, though, is if he does do really well, is there the possibility of the price being hiked all of a sudden? But then I hear there's talks. So how many years does he have left on his contract? I think 2 years, maybe.
Many, yeah, I'm not too sure, but it can't be many. But yeah, I think Kolo Muani can bring stuff that these other guys don't. And I think what you said about the chaos element, I think sometimes people see chaos as a negative, but I think in terms of attackers, being able to disrupt defenses on their own is such a massive attribute. And like you said, even if they need 2 or 3 chances to score, they're creating so many on their own that's going to lead to 1 or 2 goals. And I think you even look at someone like Mane when he first joined Liverpool. He's chaos, and chaos in the best way possible, and potentially missed a few chances. He became much more clinical later on, but potentially missed a few chances, but always created them and always was a threat. And I think that's something that Kolo Muani can really bring. That sometimes these three don't. These three seem to kind of need certain scenarios and certain kind of situations to be a threat. Richarlison probably needs service into the box. Tel needs to be able to face goal. Solanke probably isn't isn't really a threat and needs to kind of have the perfect opportunity on his plate. Whereas Kolo Muani, I think, is someone that can create in all kind of ways, create shooting opportunities in all kinds of ways, and really does bring that chaos. So I'm hopeful for him. But I think that's the 4 kind of summed up. Let us know if you. Yeah, go on.
One thing I will say, though, is for me, there is definitely almost like a time limit on one of these guys needs to grab this shirt by the scruff of the neck. And I think I'm looking at kind of almost like early December. I hope one of these 4 has made a stake or a claim to that shirt, because I do think genuinely it could be a negative to our season if we're still juggling come December, January. Oh, this guy's got 3 goals, this guy's got 4 goals, this guy's got 2 goals, and this one's struggling to find fitness. It could undo all the work that we're building in the midfield. The defense, I feel like, is actually fit this season and looking like they can keep clean sheets as well. So if you've got everything perfect almost behind that, you've got depth on the bench for once. I just hope this musical chairs of this centre forward position isn't the thing that kind of holds us back, and we're kind of thinking, should we have gone out and got a bona fide 9 in the summer? And we're asking all those types of questions. So I really hope come by like latest Christmas, one of these guys has really solidified himself as the bona fide 9 in the team. I don't care if it's Kolo, I don't care if it's Richarlison, Tel, just one of you.
100%. I agree. I think no team achieves great things without a guaranteed starting striker. I think there's other players that can rotate, but you need a goal scorer, or you need at least a consistent focal point as a 9. So I think, it's down to one of them to really stake their claim, and we'll see where we're at by after Christmas. Fuad, thank you so much for coming on the channel. I'll leave all your kind of descriptions in the link below. I'm sure you guys have seen lots of Fuad, but I'll leave those anyway. Love to get you back on the channel sometime soon.
Definitely do it again.
And come on, you Spurs.